This podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's new Patreon community, the Global Coffee Think Tank. Check the show notes or head to patreon.com/Mapper Forward to find out how you can become a member today. Welcome back to the Daily Coffee Pro by Mapper Forward, Carlos. This is going to be really fun because I just had to stop you talking then because you seemed so excited about some of the ways that the pandemic has kind of influenced your thinking as an entrepreneur and a business owner. So in the last episode of the Daily Coffee Pro, we spoke about what the state of the coffee industry in Mexico was like pre-pandemic. And now we're going to start talking about how the coffee industry was, how it basically reacted to the pandemic coming on, because the way that the Mexican government reacted to supporting its people was very different to the way that I experienced it in America and how the Australian coffee industry experienced it.
Yeah.
So how did you guys, what happened March 2020?
I was expecting that. Since end of February, I was talking with my team about this is gonna reach Mexico. We need to be prepared. And it was hard because there was uncertain indications from the government. For example, in Mexico City, each neighborhood has different instructions. So,
oh wow,
it was weird. For example, we were open at the coffee shop, and there was maybe 10% of people in the streets, and then the officer came and gave us a paper which says you need to close at 5 p.m. and you cannot open before 9 a.m. So they restricted the
hours,
the time, the hours, yeah. And then they never asked formally to close the coffee shop, but there were days when we only sell like one coffee, so it doesn't
really
even make for the machine to get.
Yeah, right. It's not even cover the cost of the electricity to the machine.
Yes, and also there were some regulations like using the mask but also using like a shield.
Right.
And
that was regulated.
You cannot, yeah, supposedly, and you cannot have like too many people from your staff working. You need to have just I can only have 2 people, and it was difficult for the coffee shops because as I told you, the baristas were realizing if barista career was something for the future. And that moment when your employer cannot support a pandemic closing at least 3 months makes you think that if he can't, what can I expect? So it was really hard.
I'd never thought of it from that perspective before, in that the pandemic gave the possible next generation of business owners from within the industry insight into how vulnerable it is to be a business owner.
Yeah. Yes, I remember my business, as I told you, it's very small and it's not very profitable, and I had maybe enough money to sustain 1 month. Then we started like a Kickstarter to fund some of the expenses, and we survived the 2nd month. But then it was hard because I don't even have money for anything, and I was like, I cannot continue with your salaries anymore. Maybe we need to arrange them, and once this gets better, if it gets better, we can negotiate again.
Right.
So we talked with the team, and some of them, they really have like, no, dude, I need a job with the full payment right now. And I was like, okay, I cannot give it to you, but I'm not sure any can. So well, it was weird because some baristas were like quitting their jobs, but no one is going to be able to hire them. And our staff only lost 2 members, and one of them started a small business, a roastery.
I hate to ask, is it still open?
What?
I hate to ask, is it still open?
Yeah.
Oh, good. That's great.
Yeah. I'm gonna talk about that later, I guess. Mm-hmm. But then we made this with the guys. I always like to be transparent about the numbers with the team.
Awesome.
It was like, these are the sales. I can only pay for 70%, maybe 50%. And then I say, hey, you can have the 70 back, and then you have the 100% back. And then we make a little adjustment, even higher, because I really like to talk with the baristas and the roasters about their struggling with the pandemic situation. And I thought it was a great moment to adjust salaries because the most of the coffee community was realizing they didn't have savings. So I was like, I remember perfect. I was at the coffee shop making a shift with one of the roasters, and we haven't sold a coffee like in 4 hours. Wow. So we started talking about anything, music, and I was like, hey, dude, can I ask you something personal? And he was like, of course. He's very open. And I was like, do you have any savings? No. And I was like, how much do you need to pay for rent, to pay for food, transportation, and maybe pleasures like cocktails and an iPhone, that kind of stuff, and also have some budget for savings. So he told me that he needs at least around 600 USD, which is kind of a good salary in Mexico City. Regular baristas at that moment were earning 200 USD a month.
Wow.
Yeah. So actually, he used to have like 350 USD per month salary, and I was like, I'm gonna make anything possible to rise it to 600. And from that, I started the conversation with other collaborators about their needs, and adjust that. Since at that point, I don't even have a business. My company was in business.
Right.
So I was like, this is the moment to really start to grow together.
It really presented an opportunity for people to reassess the viability of, we have a moment here to make some real change. If there's ever going to be a time to make change, the pandemic has offered us the opportunity to do that.
And I don't know if it was just for us, because my wife and myself turned into father and mother during the pandemic, and that also changed our mind. because some of
Yeah.
our roasters and baristas have children too. So I don't know if this changed in all of the business owners, but I'm pretty sure that baristas realize in that moment, for example, the importance of how is healthcare. Yeah.
Right.
You
And
know?
Jerry Smith spoke about this on the podcast in Spanish when she came on. And she spoke of a really beautiful, tender, and very real moment between you and her, where she was in sitting with your baby. And you asked her a question. And you said to her, do you think our employees would be able to afford to have a baby?
Yeah.
And she said she just cried and cried and cried at the realization that
Yes.
being a parent isn't even something that baristas can consider in Mexico.
Yes, I have a close friend of another close friend just find out that he's gonna turn into a father, and he started a new job, a good one, but he needs to quit his own dream of having a roastery and
Right.
a small coffee shop. You know, it's not that easy, and we really think that the business owners should measure success not in the amount they had at the bank accounts, but in the amount of tranquility and that the employees can live. You know, like if you want a roaster to roast properly and cup properly and develop coffee and develop maybe customers, you need to have a roaster with no worries about health, food, living. But most of the business owners before pandemic don't even think about that.
Right.
Yeah. And the pandemic changed that.
We this year, we just launched our Patreon. And as a part of the Patreon, we have two goals. First of all, we want to make the podcast ad and sponsor free. But the bigger goal is that we want to create a community called we have created a community called the Global Coffee Think Tank. The purpose of this community is to identify the real problems members of the community are having. You know, like what you're saying, I want to be able to pay my staff and cover their healthcare costs because I know that the quality of their life will be so much better if I can just do these two things. And if the quality of their life is improved, they're going to be happier at work. But how do we do that? And in all I've been doing a lot of consulting work for the last 5 years, and so much more of it happened during the pandemic because people really wanted to try and solve these problems, but they're inaccessible. And we have solved these problems for some people. What I'm starting to realize is that these are problems that are not just being experienced by one or two business owners. These are problems that are being experienced by most of the business owners in our industry across the world. And there are some people who just want to figure it out for themselves, but there are a big majority of people who don't know how to figure out the answers. And I think that if we can collectively come together as a think tank and really talk openly and with strong vulnerability, not weak vulnerability, but if we can come with strong vulnerability and discuss these issues, perhaps we can start to figure out, well, what are the underpinning problems that are preventing us from being able to create businesses? Because we know there's a customer base out there, right? Is it that we're not charging enough? Is it that we're not educated enough on the parts of the business, like understanding our financial statements that help us price things correctly? I can tell you from the consulting work that I do That's a big part of it. The moment I teach people how to do proper cost breakdown analysis, everything changes.
Yeah. Yes. We have the most of the coffee business in Mexico City, coffee shops and roasteries. They're opened by people like me, just passionate guys who
Yeah.
want to serve cups of coffee, and we don't know anything about business.
Yeah.
We learn through the career.
As you go.
Yeah, and that's very complicated, but
we can change this.
Yeah.
This is something that we can fix. Like, I feel like people, I suspect you're a creative person, right? Well, because creative people are the best entrepreneurs. It's just that they haven't been given the analytical information that's necessary to supercharge them, right? So 100%, I'm convinced that if I could show you how to do a cost breakdown analysis and read a profit and loss statement, everything would change for you. And I'm going to do that with you if you want it. Just because these are the kinds of things, you're the kind of person who will take that information and share it with everybody that you think, right? So this ends up empowering an entire community, not just one business. And that's what the think tank is for. So that when somebody has an idea or somebody presents a problem, it's not just one person that gets the rewards of the hive mind thinking about this. Everybody gets to take those ideas and churn them in their head and wonder how they can apply it to themselves. And then they come back with more solutions. Because I'm tired of everyone reinventing the wheel in the coffee industry. It's not working. When the pandemic showed up, I was in San Diego and immediately I could see that a lot of the people who were like you, that were just passionate coffee people and creative enough to understand that I could figure this out as I go, I realized that they were going to become aware very quickly that they weren't the only ones that were experiencing the challenges that they were experiencing. The pandemic was going to expose that pretty much everybody in the coffee industry was experiencing that, no matter where you sat along the supply chain. And that's what happened.
Yes. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I had a guy who now he collaborates with me in one of the coffee shops just as a 2-day barista, but because he has a roasting project, and he brought to me his new coffee. And he was like, Carlos, I want you to taste this coffee. It's from the guy you already know from Veracruz. I roasted it. Let's cup it. And we cupped that coffee. It was amazing. It tasted like marshmallow. It was
wow.
Yeah. And I was like, how much it costs? And he gave me the price, and I was like, dude, no way. No way. And he wasn't even charging the most like obvious things, like the energy, the delivery,
the rent.
Not even the rent. Yes, because he asked for a roaster to a friend, so he doesn't pay rent. And I was like, man, but do you want to have your own roastery? Yes. Start putting that.
You have to account for that from now.
Yeah, I was like, are you earning a salary from your own company? No, because I'm the owner. No. If you want to hire someone, first invent or create that position with yourself.
At least account for it. So when you do the cost breakdown analysis as a part of your operating costs, even if you're not paying for it right now, you have to have that as an assignment in the as a line item. The big problem is that most people have an idea of how to do this kind of stuff. They sit there in their mind or on a napkin. They write down, we've all done it. We're right. Well, it's the cup and it's the milk and it's the espresso and it's the machine and it's the rent and it's this and that. But how many hidden costs are there in running a business?
Yeah, the taxes itself. Most of roasters in coffee shops here don't pay taxes.
And then one day they have to.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's the day they end up going out of business.
Yeah.
So just quickly before we wrap this episode up, I don't know if you have any insight into this, but do you know how it was for producers when the pandemic hit in Mexico?
It was hard too. I have two close producers. One of them is part of my family, and he struggles because it was difficult to visit the farm and make sure that the work was making properly. And the other one is a good friend of mine. He got even when he has like sanitary protocols, some of the staff got COVID, and that kind of stopped everything 1 week.
Right.
We work with a living product, so
right.
1 week of cherries just in a box is like
changes the product.
Yes, and then once they had the coffee, I've heard and I've got some offerings from producers offering their coffees at a super low cost with 1.5 years credits just to move the coffee, because they don't want to keep the coffee in the warehouse.
Wow.
Yes.
So
it was, but it was also because they realized that roasters, we were in troubles to move coffee and to afford for new beans. So it was actually very like community-driven strategy in which ourselves as a roasters, we gave credit to the coffee shops.
Right.
For 6 months, 1 year. We also have 2 customers with some pending accounts from 2019. And also some producers gave us the chance to pay in 6 months, 10 months, 12 months. So that helped to keep the coffee flowing.
Moving. Yeah.
Yeah.
But eventually that stress gets too much.
Yes.
I think we might be there. From what I'm hearing from some people, friends who own cafes across Mexico and who have roasting companies across Mexico, it's getting a little too stressful.
Yes.
So let's talk about that in the next episode.
Sure.
Awesome. Peace, love, and peanut butter, everyone. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.